good afternoon. I'm Chris Kane, CPWR's Executive Director, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on CPWR's new data dashboards to respond quickly to the changing construction industry and support construction stakeholders. Our data center has published a series of interactive data dashboards that will provide users with access to more detailed information and flexible charts than ever before. On the webinar today, we have Dr. Sue Dong. She is the director of our data center, Dr. Amber Trueblood, the assistant director and the newest member of our data center team, Samantha Brown, research analyst, and William Harris, research assistant with the data center. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sue to get started, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you, Chris, for your nice introduction. Thanks, everyone, for your joining our webinar. Today, my team and I will present some new dashboards. And before we see the new dashboard, I'd like to go over the overview of today's webinar. The first, I will summarize our planning, progress, and our most recent schedules till the end of the year. Then, my team members, Sam, will present OSHA inspections and citations in construction from 2011 to 2020. You will see what is dynamic titles. I believe that would be very useful. Amber will present construction payroll establishments and employees from 2011 to 2019. Why we did not have 2020? 2019 is the most recent data available. William will show you new findings about Hispanic construction workers. These findings will be presented in, I called story dashboard. You will see what is a story dashboard. That dashboard will include more than one dashboard, but you can click that, just one link to get all those dashboards. Now, I believe all of you are very familiar with the chart book. Why I'd like to keep the image of the chart book here? Because someone may have to know that all the dashboard will report the information and the topics covered by our construction chart book. Here's our data bulletins. We started to publish data bulletins since 2020. I give the list here because we want data dashboards and data bulletins work side by side together and complement each other. Here's what we have planned. First, we developed all the standards, including structure, major components, logo information, icon, filters, how to download the data, the format, etc., etc. We also developed a template so that all this will benefit our data users, of audience, so that they easily to find the data and that will be user-friendly. In terms of the updating, we'd like to update this based on the research priority and data availability. This is different from our chart book. You know, the chart book we can only publish once several years. But this new design data dashboard allows us to update the data frequently. For example, we are able to update the dashboard with COVID-19 vaccination information monthly. Annually data, like Safeway data, you know that as soil data from BOS, those annual data we will update annually. So how can you know when we'll have the new products? We will announce that through the CPWR update. Now, please pay attention to that. We will announce what the new data products or data dashboard are available. For publishing, first, we published one by one. I will give you an example what is one by one, a standalone dashboard. And we also want to publish or accompany data bulletins with similar topics or issues. Finally, we will combine the interactive chart construction chart book by combining all the dashboards we have and we will develop it. Here's where you can, how we organized the dashboard on the CPWR website and where you can find the dashboard. First, go to the CPWR website and go to the research. Under Data Center, you will find data dashboards. Now we have a couple of dashboards available online. You can take a look if you're interested. This is what I mean standalone dashboard. This is also available on our website. This dashboard presents the data construction focus form. This is how we let dashboards go with data bulletins. I put this side by side. This is our vaccination dashboard. This is the most recent data bulletin that they have share the similar topic. From the dashboard, you can get the more detailed data weekly. You click, you can see that in detail. And sorry, can you hear me? I make it a little bit louder. Better? I changing my speaker voice. Okay. And then for the data bulletin, you can find the summarized information. That's how we let data bulletins and the data dashboards go together. Then, when we have more dashboards, we will combine a book by combining all the dashboards. In the future, you would see one page like this in our dashboard. Right now, we put the introductions above each of the dashboard. In the future, we'd like to include in the dashboard so that you are able to get all the information you need when you click, when you print. Please notice the letters and the numbers in blue color. That means that numbers and text will be changeable. That is dynamic. What does dynamic mean? After you see the presentations from Sam, you will see what the dynamic means. And then when we have more, when we combine a book, all this will be changed. When we update, the numbers will be updated. When you use to select what are the years or criteria that you want, all the numbers will change correspondingly. That we will design this control this by parameters. So that's what it would look like the future when we compile a book. Here's what we are doing. This is 3 dashboard you will see today. We will present today, and this also will be published on our website with our next data bulletin, also inspection of construction falls and the impact of COVID-19. And by the end of October, we will have another new data bulletin and 2 new data dashboards. The topic is construction safety management during the COVID-19 pandemic. And by the end of the year, we want to publish the last issue of this year for the data bulletin, which will be mental health among construction workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now we are still waiting for the data. We will work on this. That's what I want to show you today. If you have any questions, I would be very happy to answer them by the end of the presentation. Now I will pass the presentation to Sam. Sam, please.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, so I will share my screen here. And hopefully you're able to see my screen now. So I will be presenting some findings from our new dashboard, which is on my screen. This is titled OSHA Inspections and Citations in Construction from 2011 to 2020. So as I'm presenting, I'll walk through each of these charts that you see on the screen. I'll talk about some features of this dashboard, as well as features that are common across all of our data center dashboards, and I'll talk about some key findings. So some publication details. What we're presenting today, the dashboards that we'll be presenting have not yet been published on the CPWR website, but they will be published in the next week or two. So as Sue showed, we have a new webpage on the CPWR website specifically for dashboards, so be on the lookout for that. This dashboard in particular will correspond with our August 2021 data bulletin on fall citations in construction. So Sue showed some examples of how, in some cases, we publish data bulletins and dashboards side by side so they complement each other, and that is the case with this dashboard. Okay, so diving into this dashboard, the purpose is to show trends in construction industry inspections conducted by OSHA from calendar years 2011 to 2020 and their corresponding citations during those years. To do this, we downloaded publicly available enforcement data, which was provided by the OSHA office where each inspection happened, and we included all inspections that happened in the construction industry. So we defined a construction inspection as an inspection that happened on a construction work site or on a work site associated with the construction industry or NICE 23. So moving to this information icon you see to the right of the title, all of our dashboards have this. And it just provides, if you hover your mouse over it, some key information about the dashboard. So it shows instructions for dashboard use at the top. It describes some of the filters. It gives you chart notes or technical information about the data source we use, and then it gives some definitions for terms that are used in the dashboard. Another feature of this dashboard and of all of our dashboards is interactivity. So if you hover your mouse over different portions of the legend or the chart, you can see what you're looking at. So we call these tooltips. It provides you with the data for the specific portion of the chart that you're hovering over and the different variables. The information icon also describes the different filters used in the chart. So as you can see here, this chart has 4 filters. They're all underneath the title, and I'll walk through each one of these. So when you set these filters in the dashboard, it applies to all of the charts at the same time, and you can use all of the filters at once. So the first filter that we're looking at here is activity type. So this dashboard can show data by inspections, or you can look at all citations or fall citations by federal standards. So I'll show you an example of what happens when I click on this. Sorry, it's a little slow to update sometimes. I'll try that again. There we go. So when you click on when you select an option for the filter, you can see that all of the charts in the dashboard updated. And as Sue mentioned, we have this dynamic text. So previously, the title said the number of total inspections by state, but now because I clicked on fall citations, the title says number of total fall citations by federal standards. And that's the case for all of these charts. So the titles update and you can have a better idea of what you're looking at and don't get kind of lost in the filters. Something else I want to mention here is the definition that we used for fall citations by federal standards. So for this dashboard, we defined fall citations as violations of federal OSHA standard CFR 1926 subpart M. So this is specific to fall protection. So it includes the duty to have fall protection systems, criteria, and practices, and fall protection training. So note that there are other types of citations that could be related to falls, for example, if there's issues with ladders or something like that. But for this data bulletin, we focused specifically on construction fall protection. In addition to that, we looked specifically at this federal standard. So we looked at cases where the federal standard of fall protection was violated. And that's what we count here when we look at fall citations in the charts. Some other filters in this dashboard, we have year. So as the title shows, we have years 2011 to 2020. In all of the charts in this dashboard, you can look at as many or as few years as you want. The map and the bar charts show the total of the years selected. So these show the total of 2011 to 2020. The pie chart in the bottom left shows the average of the years selected because it shows a percentage instead of a total. Other filter that you can look at is subsector. So right now in these subtitles, you can see that we're looking at all construction by default. But if we wanted to, we could look at a specific subsector. So for example, construction of buildings. And when I select that, I can see all of the charts on my dashboard updated to construction of buildings. So the data is updated and the title is also updated. And then lastly, we can look at OSHA office, which is the filter all the way on the right. So right now we see that we're looking at all, let's set this to inspections. So by default, we're looking at all inspections in construction from 2011 to 2020. If we wanted to look only at inspections that were issued by a federal OSHA office or by a state OSHA office, we could do that. And you can see that when I selected state, all of the charts updated. You can also see in the map, some states are gray. That's because some states have do not have state OSHA plans, so it's only federal inspections that happen there. So those are all of the filters, and again, you can use all of them at once and explore the data and customize what you're looking at based on what your interests are. So now we'll walk through the different charts that we have. I'll do this chart by chart. I'll explain the contents and then point out some of our key findings. So to make things simple, I'm going to filter to the year 2019 to start, and we'll start with this map chart on the top left. So you can see here we're looking at the number of total inspections by state. And if I hover my mouse over the states, I can see the number of inspections in 2019. You can see some states are darker than others, meaning they had more inspections. So for example, Texas, California, and Washington all had over 2,000 inspections in 2019. If we wanted to look at citations, we could do that also. So here, similarly, you can see the same states that had many inspections also had many citations in 2019, which is expected. You can also see the total penalty when you filter to citations. So we can see, for example, that Texas in 2019 had $9.7 million worth of construction citations. Moving on to the next chart, actually for this, I want to look at all of the years in our study period. So I want to see 2011 to 2020. And I want to look at inspections again, and you can remember those were the default setting for the filter. So I want to go back to the default setting of the filter, I can do that with this button on the bottom right of the dashboard, and this is something that's common to all of dashboards, this reset button. So if you ever get lost in the filters or lose track of what you selected, if you click on this reset button, you'll see that the filters are all set back to the default. So now we're looking in this chart on the top right at the number of total inspections in all construction by scope and year from 2011 to 2020. And a couple trends to point out here. First, you can see that overall, the number of inspections in construction decreased over time. So in 2011, there were 47,000 inspections in construction. In 2019, that number was 37,500. You also see a big drop between 2019 and 2020, and that's COVID related. So it reflects an effort of OSHA to reduce face-to-face person contact to reduce the spread of the virus. And then something else to look at here are the proportion of construction inspections that were partial with this orange bars, or complete, or inspections of full work sites with these blue bars. And you can see that over time, the number of partial inspections remained relatively constant, but the number of complete inspections reduced. So we're looking at a larger and larger percentage of construction inspections that were partial. So this could reflect an effort of OSHA to look at more targeted hazards when conducting inspections rather than doing inspections of full work sites every single time. Okay, so moving on to the bottom left chart, I'm going to filter to the year 2019 again. And in this chart, we're looking at the percentage of inspections by establishment size. So we know that most construction establishments are pretty small. So what we're seeing here isn't too surprising. We're seeing that 70% of construction inspections in 2019 happened in establishments with less than 10 or with 1 to 9 employees. We could also look at citations here if we wanted to and compare the percentage. And we can see that the percentage is even larger for citations. So 76% of construction citations in 2019 happened among establishments with less than 10 people. And then if we want to look specifically at false citations, we can do that too, and we see the percentage is even larger at 83%. The last chart I want to show is on the bottom right. Here we're looking at the number of total false citations by federal standards by top NICS industries. So while subsector, we're looking at the general major subsector, so 3-digit NICS, this is a little bit more specific at 5 digits. And here we can see that roofing contractors had the most false citations by federal standards in 2019 at over 7,000 citations, and that resulted in a penalty of over $26 million. Followed by that was framing contractors, and followed by that was residential building construction. If we wanted to, we could also filter by subsector. So say we just want to look at these trends by specialty trade contractors, we could do that. We see all of the charts update, and this, again, subtitle updates. Because roofing contractors are a type of specialty trade contractor, we still see that and framing contractors in the top 2. But rather than residential construction here, we're seeing that masonry contractors are the number 3 in the top false citations. And we see that in 2019, masonry contractors accrued over $1 million worth of penalties for false citations by federal standards in 2019. A couple more things I wanted to show are features that are applicable to all the dashboards that we produce. So the first is this Export to Excel button in the top right corner. If you ever want access to the data file, you click on this. You can see an Excel file downloads. And in the Excel file, there is a tab for each chart in the dashboard that gives you all of the data you need. The data that's included in the Excel download is based on the filter that's applied. So for example, here, my Excel download will include data on false citations by federal standards because I have that filter applied under activity type. And then lastly, if you want to download an image of this dashboard, you can do that in the bottom right-hand corner here where it says download. So you have options to download an image file, or you could download a PDF file or a PowerPoint file. So say I wanted to include this dashboard in a presentation, I could download the PowerPoint. I'd click on this view so I can get a full view of the entire dashboard. And then I get this download here, I get the PowerPoint. and a full view of the dashboard. So you can send that in emails or embed it in your presentations. And that's all I have. Now I'm going to pass things over to Amber, who is going to talk about payroll establishments and employees.
Thank you, Sam, for that wonderful presentation. It's a hard act to follow you guys this morning, or well, afternoon officially. I'm excited to be here this afternoon as it's a day of first for me. So starting with COVID, I started celebrating like the positive things. So today is my first time presenting a data dashboard, and it is also my first presentation with CPWR since starting in July as the Data Center Assistant Director. So some positive things today. Very excited to be here. Today, as Sam mentioned, I'm going to be presenting our construction payroll establishments and employees dashboard, which summarizes data on payroll establishments and employees in the construction industry from 2011 to 2019. As Sue mentioned, 2020 data is not available for this specific dashboard. Data for this series is delayed approximately 16 months following each reference year, which means our 2020 data won't be available until April 2022, just to give you an understanding of how the data works on that timeline. The data is coming from the County Business Patterns, or CBP data, which is an annual series produced by the U.S. Census Bureau, providing information by industry for establishments with paid employees. The data is extracted from the Business Register, which is a database of all known single and multi-establishment employer companies, which again is maintained and updated by the Census Bureau. Okay, before we get too far, I think it's important that we stop and take a look at the establishment definition being used. I think you can all define establishment differently, especially when we're thinking in construction. So just so that we know what's included, we'll go ahead and define that. So for the purposes of this data set, an establishment is a single physical location where a business, service, or distribution of goods occurs. Then entire establishment is classified based on its major activity. So if an establishment actually is conducting more than one activity, the major activity is the defining activity, and all data are included under that major classification. Now, when we're thinking about construction establishments have their own slight caveats. So specifically to construction, individual sites, projects, fields, lines, or systems of such dispersed activities are not considered to be establishment. A construction establishment is represented by a relatively permanent main branch office that either directly supervises such activities or is the base from which our personnel operate to carry out the activities. So using that definition and some of the limitations to how the business register is set up, our data does exclude self-employed or non-employer establishments. So that's a lot of information on the data. I promise that's it, because you guys are here to see data dashboards, but it's very important so you guys understand what we're talking about today. As you can see on the screen here, this dashboard has 6 charts, including a map of construction establishments by state. So here where I'm hovering, as well as 2 pie charts looking at establishments and employees by our establishment size. And then we have 3 charts split by subsector. So our subsector charts include number of establishments by year and establishments and employees by establishment size and subsector. So here we have a pie chart within a donut chart, which we'll get into because it's like a chart inception, but it allows us to show you guys more information compared out to subsectors. So it's a fun chart to look at. So I'm going to highlight each chart in a little bit more detail than I just did in that high level overview as we try to answer a question. So today, for today's purposes, let's say hypothetically, we are interested in looking at the trends of establishments and employees for the 3 states with the largest number of construction establishments over the past 5 years. So how would I use that dashboard to look specifically at that? So first, we should narrow our year range to our time period. So we said past 5 years, so we'll select 2015 to 2019. So our data has updated here and narrowed down to our year range. And now how do we identify the top 3 states? So immediately on our map here, if you see where my mouse is, we can see California is leading. It has the definitely darkest orange, with about 75,000 establishments we hover over. Now from here, we can see that Texas, Florida, and New York also are darker oranges. And so immediately you can see the top 4 states on this map. There's no doubt about which are the top 4. However, for the purposes of our goal today, we really want to look at the top 3. So how would we get the top 3 from this dashboard? There are a couple of options for getting this. So first, you can hover over the state as I showed you before, so California has about 75,000 establishments. Texas has 45,000 establishments. Florida has about 54,000 establishments on average. New York has about 49,000 construction establishments during this time period. So you can click and hover, and if we all have really good memories, we know that California, Florida, and New York are actually our top 3, so that pushes Texas out for our top 3 for number of establishments. If you're interested, like let's say you're going to a presentation and you just quickly want to know what Texas is, you can actually copy this, put it in an email, put it in your notepad for the meeting you're going to really quickly get data. Now let's say that you're more of a spreadsheet person. You like to visually see the data. We can see the top 4, but you want to see the numbers behind that. So that feature Sam showed you, and this is the other way that you could identify the top 3 states. Put you on the right screen. So the data downloads, each chart puts an order here for you, so that's really nice. And you can also sort and filter, so we're interested in establishments, so largest to smallest. And realize you guys probably are seeing itty bitty. So if we sort by number of establishments, we can see our top 3 as we identified by hovering California, Florida, and New York. So that's another way of using the data. I really love Tableau for this. I'm a data person, and they say that data people either love spreadsheets or visualization. I'm actually a weird hybrid that likes both. So Tableau lets you use both features. Okay, so we have identified our top states again as California, Florida, and New York. Now, there's a cool filter feature that most people will scroll, and we get complaints that if there's too many, like with states 50 plus, that it can get tedious to scroll. So if you know the format, you can also just type in New York there. It automatically selects that. You can see on our map what states have been selected. So now at this point, we are showing a dashboard for construction, payroll, establishments, and employees for the states, 3 states with the largest number of establishments for the past 5 years. Now we want to look at some of the trends among our establishments and employees. So when we come over here to look at establishments by establishment size, we see approximately 80% are for establishments for 1 to 9 employees. So in that the smallest establishment size. However, when we go to look at the number of employees by establishment size, we find out that establishment size 1 to 9 employees only accounts for less than a quarter of our construction employees. The largest percent, at approximately a third of employees, work for establishments, here 35%, with 20 to 99 employees. And so you do see some slight differences there. You can hover. In addition to showing the percent, this specific dashboard also shows you number, because I know a lot of the times with percent, we like to see the actual number behind it. So that has been provided here, and you can hover and get all of that wonderful information. So some pretty neat trends when we look at establishment size and for establishments and employees. Now let's go down and look at subsector trends. So just on a quick skim of this chart, we see that the overall number of establishments has increased from 2015 to 2019. So 166,000 to 189,000. You can also visually see the lines going up. However, we want to know if this is true for each subsector for the time period in our states. So let's start with construction of buildings. And so to get that information, again, you can hover. So we see about 53,000 establishments. You can continue to look at each year to see if it follows a temporal pattern. So we start at about 53,000, 55, 56, 59, to 61,000. So for construction of building subsector, we can say also that we see an increasing number of establishments during the time period. We look at specialty or heavy and civil engineering. I was going to just go ahead and jump right down there to the orange, but we won't do that. For heavy and civil engineering, 2015, we had about 7,200 establishments to 7,100 to about 7,000, a little over 7,000 and back close to 7,100. So we don't have a real clear temporal trend there, though the count's relatively small compared to other subsectors. But we may be interested in now looking at heavy and civil engineering in these states when 2020 data comes out to see what trend is happening, if we're still on the rise or what's going on there. Specialty trade contractors, our next subsector. We're not going to click on every single one because you guys can do that in your free time once you guys get your hands on this wonderful dashboard. So in 2015, we see about 106,000 establishments. In 2019, we see that jump to 120,000 establishments approximately. So again, construction of buildings and specialty trade contractors did see an increase in the number of establishments from 2015 to 2019. So now let's go ahead and look at establishments and employees split by establishment size and subsector. So as I told you, we have a chart inception going on over here, which I call it. And so on the outside ring, we have an outside donut chart. So think of a donut. It is circular and it has a hole in the middle. Our donut charts are cream filled with another pie chart. So good analogy here. So the outside donut chart is focused here, and on this one showing us establishments broken out by subsector. So the colors are subsectors, so it matches our subsector legend here. And what we see when we look at this is that 64% of our establishments and 68% of our employees fall into specialty trade contractors. Now, what's interesting when we look then at establishment size, which is going to be our inside pie chart, so our filling to our donut chart, we actually see that a majority of those establishments and specialty trade contractors fall into that establishment size 1 to 19. And then our employees, when we look at by establishment size, we actually see this breakdown to the point that almost these pie chart slices are almost the same size. So for 1 to 19, about 25% of our employees, 20 to 99 employees, 24%, 100 plus is 19% of our employees. And so you start to see really fun patterns and trends in the data that are pretty consistent across our other subsectors. So if we look at construction of buildings, you see again, 1 to 19 makes up most of our establishments by establishment size, but we see a different breakdown when we come over here to look at our employees. And that also holds true for heavy and civil engineering. So there's a lot to be gained from looking at this dashboard specifically. This today is just one example of how this dashboard can be used to examine construction, establishment, and employee trends. You can use this to do national comparisons over time. You can look at specific regions if that's what you're interested, or even just individual states. And so I just use this as a walkthrough example, but there are many, many ways you can use this data set. In addition, the data set for this is publicly available. So if you wanted to use it beyond the spreadsheet, all of our data sources are linked on our dashboards with links to direct you to their original source. I'm going to now pass the controls over to William, who's going to be showing us his story dashboard, which is a CPWR Data Center first. So I told you lots of firsts today. We had dynamic titles, my first presentation, and we're very excited for our first. So William, I will pass it to you.
All right, thank you very much, Amber. Share my screen. All right, so my name is William Harris. I'm a research assistant with the data center team, and I'm going to be presenting this Hispanic construction worker story dashboard to you all today. So Sam and Amber have already displayed two of our other dashboards that we've developed in the CPWR Data Center. And this dashboard is similar, but because it's a story dashboard, it's going to be a little bit different. One of the main advantages of using the story dashboard is that it allows us to combine multiple dashboards like the ones you've just seen into one location and enables us to explore this data a lot more easily. So this story dashboard has 3 tabs. The first one that's open right now shows employment trends. The next one that I'm going to click to is going to be demographics. And then the last one is going to show characteristics of Hispanic immigrant workers in construction. So each one of these is related in some way to Hispanic employment in construction. And for that reason, that's why we've collected the 3 of them together today. So my plan for each one of these dashboards is I'm going to start with a high-level overview that gives at a glance takeaways for each one of these dashboards. Next, I'm going to go more into depth and explore the tooltips as well as look a bit closer at the data for each dashboard. And then lastly, I'm going to incorporate some of the filters in order to get more specific views or answer particular questions that we might have as data users. So for this first dashboard that covers employment trends in construction for 2011 through 2019, we have 2 filters that are active right now. We have the year filter right here, and we also have the state filter. Because these are both set to all, our default view of the dashboard is going to show us a collection of all states averaged by year. So for our at-a-glance takeaways, we can see that looking at the map here, the American Southwest continues to have a high proportion of construction workers. Looking at our pie chart, we can see that Hispanic workers represent over a quarter of all construction workers during this time period. We can see a lot of occupations that have high proportions of construction workers in this bar chart in the bottom left, such as painters, laborers, carpenters, and others. And then looking at this bar chart by year, we can see the steady growth of not just construction occupation as a whole as more workers join the workforce, but more specifically Hispanic workers growing by over 1.2 million over our period of study. So looking a little bit closer, we can use the tooltips as Amber showed you earlier to look more in depth at these states and see exactly what percentage Hispanic on average the average number of Hispanic workers in any state. We can look over here. So we have another donut chart like Amber had talked about, the outside being the generic ethnicity between Hispanic and non-Hispanic, and then we delve down deeper to see what proportion are Mexican, other Hispanic, as well as Cuban and Puerto Rican workers. Going down here, we can see just what proportion of each occupation is Hispanic. So for instance, painters, around half are Hispanic, laborers 42%, while also representing a large number of Hispanic workers in the workforce, and so on. In addition, this by year, we can see the growing proportion of Hispanic workers. So to quickly go into a more specific view, let's say that we're interested in one of these southwestern states. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to go to Texas. You can see that the rest of the dashboard updates dynamically to show just what percentage is Hispanic. But we're still looking at all years, so let's say that we want to look at the most recent year for our data, look at 2019. And then we get a very comprehensive view of Texas during 2019 that tells us a lot of information about specific occupations, as well as a lot more detailed information about the Hispanic workers that are in Texas. So I'm going to go back to the default view. We're going to move on to demographics. So in this demographics dashboard, we cover, again, a wide range of topics. One of the charts in the top left covers the age distribution. It compares Hispanic, which is the orange line, to non-Hispanic workers, which is the blue line. You can see that Hispanic workers are typically younger than non-Hispanic. We look at distribution of educational attainment based on Hispanic ethnicity, and we see that a higher proportion of Hispanic workers have a grade 12 or lower education. We can see the gap in between average age of workers while also seeing the steady rise in the age of Hispanic workers. And then we also look at women workers in construction, and we can see that this slice right here represents the proportion of Hispanic workers that are female, whereas this portion here represents the proportion of non-Hispanic workers that are female. You can see that there's a larger slice there. Because this dashboard is also controlled by a year filter, what we can do is we can select a year, and we can go to, for instance, the most recent year to get a different view of the dashboard, as well as more up-to-date information. And we can look specifically at what was 2019 like for female Hispanic workers. And then in contrast, we can go and look at 2011 to compare. See that 2019 was 6.9%, but 2011 was only 4.2%. So over time, the share of Hispanic workers that are female is growing. As we can also see that the age distribution is a little bit more severe in 2011 compared to 2019, for instance. A lot more workers in the 35 to 44 group, for instance. Moving on to our last dashboard from the story dashboard. This dashboard covers Hispanic immigrants. We have 4 main charts. We have a map that shows common birthplaces amongst Hispanic immigrants. We have a pie chart that details English speaking ability, as well as time spent, time lived in the US, in addition to citizenship status of Hispanic immigrant workers. So this first map shows us that a large majority of Hispanic immigrants are coming from, were born in Mexico, others born in Central America. And in this map, we can drag around and zoom in. So I'm going to zoom in using these plus signs, get a better view to see how many show the birthplace from Cuba, as well as Puerto Rico, West Indies. This shows that on average about a third of Hispanic immigrants speak English but not very well, and furthermore 13.5% of them don't speak English at all. We can see that a majority of Hispanic immigrant workers that have lived in the US have lived here for a long time, 16 plus years, and even still a vast majority have lived 6+ years. And over time, we can see that the number of Hispanic immigrant workers is growing, but so too is the proportion of them that are citizens compared to non-citizens. So delving in a little bit deeper, we can get a view for our most recent year, 2019. We can see that indeed a vast majority are living here for a long time. Again, these birthplaces are pretty consistent with what we saw earlier, as well as the English speaking ability. But if we look at this bottom left chart, I want to compare it to 2011. I can do that by switching the year filter. And we can see the difference between those 2 years, where a lower proportion now is 16 plus, and it's more evenly distributed. So a lot of these Hispanic workers who were here in 2011 stay in the United States and end up over here in 2019. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I believe we have time to take questions.
Thanks, William. And Sam and Amber and Sue, that was a great presentation. I have a few questions that have come in, as well as one that came in before the webinar I wanted to ask you, but I wanted to remind participants we are happy to look at your questions as you think of them right now and try to get to a few of them in the next 10 minutes. The first question we got was sent in before the webinar, and the question is, will you provide API access to your data center for the live connection to company analytical software? And Amber, I think you were going to respond to that one.
Yes, sorry about that. My computer didn't want to unmute, thought we were done. But yes, so We do not offer any APIs for our data products at this time. However, all of our dashboards, as shown, have downloadable Excel spreadsheets. In addition, all of the products shown today are using publicly available data sources in which the federal government may have available APIs. I'm going to put 2 links in there. For the Department of Labor and the Census actually have web pages with APIs with some of the data sources referenced today, plus many more.
Okay, great. One question that I have is, how often will the dashboards be updated?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that. So depending on the dashboard, there's going to be different timelines for updating them. For instance, data that relies on yearly publications, for instance, some of the dashboards that we showed today, it's going to be when data is available, it's typically going to be on a yearly basis. But other dashboards that we have available, such as the COVID-19 vaccinations dashboard, that's planned on being updated monthly, and our next planned update is at the beginning of September.
Okay, great. One question came in through the chat. I think Sue answered it, but the question is, does the OSHA inspection dashboard include Puerto Rico?
Yes.
Okay, that's one thing that's one thing maybe to flag too, because we didn't see it depicted in the diagram.
Well,
we might want to
because
think about
that's
that.
small on the map, but
Yeah.
yeah, then the numbers are included. If you can find on the map, you click that, you can see the numbers. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Great. On the establishment size dashboard, do the downloadable Excel spreadsheets include the type of specialty trade contractors? Because it looks like we're doing a 2-digit NAICS code for the purposes of presenting the data, but can somebody download our spreadsheets and kind of dig further into the type of specialty trade contractors?
The
So
answer is yes. Go ahead.
Well, the Tableau file, the top is restricted to 2-digit 23 code, and then the subsector 3-digit, but the Excel file linked does not give anything further. But that is something we can explore because we have the feature in the data.
Okay. And just as a reminder to anyone listening that our data center is here to answer specific questions. If you see something in the dashboards or in one of our publications that doesn't quite answer the question you have about construction and you're part of construction, that's part of what we do, is respond to public inquiries. If we have the data, we will do an analysis special for you and provide that information. Good question. Just came in on the chat. Do you have statistics on independent contractors in addition to those construction employees?
Yes. That will be included in our next new data dashboard. We have a specific information on that under development. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, another question kind of related is, will we be able to see the data bulletin adjacent to the dashboard as we saw earlier in the presentation? Sue showed a dashboard and an image of the data bulletin. I wonder
Yes.
if there's, okay.
Pretty sure. Yes. That's what we designed.
Okay. We did see another question. Will this be a future feature? I'm not exactly sure what that question is, but our intention is to, as Sue described in the opening, is to essentially move the type of information that we've been periodically providing in our construction chart book into these dashboards, which will be updated in as close to real time as the data is available. So I think that was the tone of the question. Anything to add, Sue?
Oh, I just say I just say you mentioned the chart book. Eventually, we will combine as a book. So in that way, I showed the one slide. In the future, our audience or readers should be able to have everything similar as what we saw on the current chart book. As a basic information, introduction, or the key findings. The difference is all those information specifically for the key findings will be dynamic, which means users can select what they want. While they're only interested in 2 years, they can select. They're only interested in certain time period or certain geographical areas. If that information is available, they are supposed to get that. And then they can print out, our user can print out in a hard copy, in the PDF. Then when they combine all of those hard copy, they will have their own chart book as a reference book by hand.
Great, thank you, Sue. Great question that's just come in. Will there be data on incident rates in construction based on company size? We absolutely have that information, and
yeah, let me answer that question. That's our plan, but we are limited by data access. Right now, we are unable to do. You saw our publications, or even in the chart book, or in the data bulletins, or our peer-reviewed journal articles, we did have such findings. But if we have no data, we cannot do that. Let's see if we will have access to the detailed data or the research files from BIS, definitely we will continue to do that. In that way, when we have several dashboards for all the injuries, for example, and then they will go to the same section, similar as the chart book. Under the injury section, readers can see overall injuries, fatal injuries, non-fatal injuries, by detailed construction sectors, by detailed demographics, even the establishment size, and the comparison between construction and the other industries. Whatever we have before, if the data available, we will cover by our future interactive chart book. I believe our users will have a more detailed and updated data. I didn't mention that when I compared the dashboard and data bulletin side by side for the vaccination. You can see that we only report the data by May. I mean our data bulletin, because that's the data we could use, publish that. However, after we publish that data bulletin, we already updated 1 more month. William mentioned that we will update it in September, so that that's why we developed the type of a dashboard. Even data bulletin, we can publish much more frequently than chart book. Still, that is not the more difficult to update, or maybe it's not worth doing another update. Well, we have another data bulletin on the similar issues. We may not have many things to tell you, but the dashboard is different. It provides very detailed this week and next week, this month and next week in terms of something related to COVID-19 can be different. So that's why we want to provide a timely data to our users and audience.
Well, thank you, Sue, and thank you, Data Center team. I'm going to wrap up now, but I wanted to flag for the follow-up if we can provide some information on the previous studies that the Data Center has done on incident rates based on company size, as well as occupational disease and injury even though we don't have a dashboard for it yet, we might be able to flag something for in response to that question and compensation costs. So those are suggestions from the participants. You know, will there be future dashboards for these topics? So that's just something to bear in mind. We hear you and we appreciate your inquiry, and so we'll figure it out as we go. And with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you everybody for participating today. Thank you, the data team, and we are going to wrap up. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.